Chapter 5 of Ten of Swords continues within the pages of Marauders number 13, and it is now Storm's turn to seek the blade that she has been tasked with finding. We open with a scene of Kitty and Roro discussing the sword and the journey to come. And the part I like the most about the opening pages of this book, it's the memories of the past. They're off to the side panels here, and I like the way it's shown with a different feel and a different tone. And it's clear that they're memories that are happening. While the entire conversation happens, we're able to look at it and we're seeing our protagonist, Storm, her heroism, her life, her powers manifesting. I really like this type of storytelling, and this is a good effect to use. And at the end of the conversation, Kitty says, "I'll keep a lamp burning in the window so you can find your way home." I like that. And there are a lot of things that I enjoyed about this writing. And there's a lot of things that I'll critique in the end. I do like this right here. When it comes down to it, this one page, it made me feel good, and it made me feel connected to the blade that Storm is tasked with finding here. They say it began with a blinding flash of light, with the sky splitting open and striking a mountain. Inside, they would find a gift from the heavens, a metal so pure that to touch it in its raw form was to know the truth of the universe. Ancestors of those that would become Wakandan forged a weapon to speak with the boom of thunder. The first Wakandan king, the first protector, was a wise and just man. When their enemies came to wreck and ravage, he begged them to turn around. He warned them that he held in his hand a conduit to heaven and that they would not survive it. They did not heed him, and so he showed them the power that split heaven and their holy mountain, Skybreaker. So welcome back to my channel and my coverage of Ten of Swords. I'm going to go through this story, and I hope that you'll join me at the end where, I'll give some notes and critiques from a writer's perspective and from actually acquaintance's perspective as well. Vita Ayala is writing this book. Matteo Lolli is doing art. Colors by Edgar Delgado. Cory Petit doing letters. And before I get too far, just a reminder, like I said, I'm covering all of Ten of Swords on my channel, so please hit subscribe and the bell so you'll know when my videos come up. Last year, I absolutely fell in love with Hickman's House of X and Powers of 10, and I'm determined to stick with him and his story to the very finish. So this is the first Hickman story that I've ever read as it was released, week by week. And if you follow Hickman, and if you've read things in the past by him, so many people will say, only binge read his stuff. And I understand why that's true now. I remember so many people discussing how tense it was to not binge read his writing. And, I think a lot of individuals are experiencing that right now, where I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable with this uncertainty. We have so many questions, so few answers, and in my case, I'm looking forward to the payoff, but I'm really enjoying the road to the finish. So continuing on with the story, Storm goes before the Queen Mother and Shuri, pleading for them and their assistance to help from the Arakko hordes that sit at their gate. Storm is welcomed with open arms. As an ambassador, as a sister, it makes me wonder what we're talking about. I know that the diplomacy is a little bit tricky between Wakanda and Krakoa. So she tells the story of the forces they must fight in this tournament to come. And she asks for a blade from the armory. And surprisingly to me, the Queen Mother offers up all of the legendary blades from their armory. The Nation Maker that has struck down over 1,000 enemies. The Panther's Claws, literally the traditional blades of the Black Panther, and the King's Mercy, T'Chaka's magical blade. And Storm says, "My heart is overwhelmed with gratitude, and yet I can't accept these. The Queen is right. The blade is one with history tied to the heart of Wakanda. It is the Skybreaker. Of course, Storm only has a couple days to return with the blade, but the Queen Mother says, the king will be back in a few days to discuss it. They're actually so taken aback, the Queen Mother and Shuri. And, of course, it's the king's decision alone. And even as Storm backs down, the look on Shuri's face makes it clear that she doesn't trust Aurora. And from my perspective, I look at her and know that she's planning to steal the blade from the very beginning. So I like this first white page. I like what they're doing. They're including white pages in all of these books that seem unrelated to the book that we're reading. And this one is talking about the Sevelethi nation. It's a nation of vampires, of blood drinkers, and of darkness. And then the next page talks of the Telementes, kind beings, made of what they say looks like light. So I feel like these descriptive pages about all of these nations, they'll come up in the Ten of Swords storyline. Likely mutants will have to travel to all of these lands to retrieve the different swords that they need for the tournament. I'm looking forward to that. I'm really looking forward to the vampire stuff because I'm me. So Shuri and Storm, they share a meal that it just serves to continue the same tensions between their separate objectives. Shuri says, "It is out of sisterly love that I ask you. Remember that I have a duty to my people that supersedes all others." Storm says the same. And in the same spirit of love, please understand that so do I. Storm then puts on her black costume and, like we all guessed, sets out into the dead of night, and we know what is to come. In the pages coming, we see the perspective go back and forth between Storm's quest to steal the Skyblade and memories of her past when the king, her ex-husband, is basically showing her, well, how to steal the blade, all of the aspects of the security system. And a little confusing. I feel like the storyline could have contributed a bit more by simply Storm being able to overcome many obstacles instead of being fed that information forefront. So she's about to take the blade from the pedestal after getting through security, making it through multiple fights, knocking some people out, and Shuri steps out and says, "I hoped that my intuition would be wrong and that I would not find you here." And a long fight ensues, and I like this fight scene. I thought it was good, and this is one of those things that is important for comics. We need to see a good duel, and this one, they both grab blades. And of course, it's very similar to what we're going to see in the future, facing off against 10 swords versus 10. And in the end, Storm touches the tip of Shuri's blade, knocking her unconscious with lightning. And Storm faces another security protocol and destroys a bunch of what look like robot dogs with her lightning power after the security alarm is tripped, and her security codes from back when, they don't take. And something unexpected happens. We see T'Challa step forward and confronts Aurora. Apparently, he wasn't away for 3 days. "My mother said you came claiming to be in need of aid, and yet we find you, stealing from those who welcomed you. There's no time for bureaucratic games, T'Challa, not with what is at stake." As Aurora steps forward, still holding the Skybreaker, she says that she is here to save her people. "Your people," T'Challa says. "I remember a time when Wakandans were your people. We could be again if you just wait and listen." Of course, he's saying that they aren't her people anymore. Aurora says, "You will step aside because you know that anything else would be the end of us all. My life does not revolve around your whims, even if my heart aches with missing you." As Aurora leaves, King T'Challa orders the gate to Krakoa to be destroyed behind her. If the emissary of Krakoa wishes to return, it will not be as a thief in the night, but with the permission and grace of Wakanda, if we choose. And Storm walks to the Circle of 10 there in Krakoa. And, she says she's been a protector longer than she has been a wife. And she talks of the sacrifices that must be made. Of course, she speaks of losing the trust of the Wakandan nation. There's a lot about this. So in my last video, I joked about the last scene of this. It just made me laugh a little bit more, I said, Magic has been standing there in that circle this whole time, waiting for Wolverine to show up, and it just looks like after all this time, that Wolverine and Magic, they've been sitting there in that glyph the entire time, just waiting for everyone else to show up. It feels a little bit like a video game, and and what if they have to go to the bathroom? I mean, I was joking that what about if they get hungry? But look, I can't go 3 days without using the restroom or drinking water. And, the next sword bearer that comes up, they better have like a canteen or like some falafel wraps or something for all three of these mutants. I mean, Magic and Wolverine, they've been sitting there for what, hours and hours now, maybe a whole, 4 or 5 hours. What are they doing? They're just talking to each other, I guess, or staring into space, I'm being silly, of course, but it's actually cool to see Aurora there with her blade and placing it in the circle. And so, that being said, all the jokes aside, I want to talk a bit more about my thoughts on the book and the writing itself. But before I get into my own thoughts, I wanted to read a very positive critique from Old Man Logan 79. So, he's an acquaintance within a comic book Discord server that I frequent, and he said this about Marauders number 13. He said, "Very good take of Storm by Vita Ayala. The script has surprised me for good. I know, and I have the comics from when Storm and Black Panther was dating in Africa as teenagers, which were actually by John Byrne. I am one of those who enjoyed her relationship with Forge much more, so I hope the Wakandan divorce has papers on the table. The script, completely agree that it is reminiscent of Claremont." I want to say that right now. That is a huge compliment forward. Very nicely said. Really good. Let me say that that's the highest praise that I've seen anyone give to anyone when talking about the X-Men. The only writer that I've ever said I felt was channeling Claremont so far has been Jonathan Hickman. And, I stand by that. I've heard both positive and opposing negative critiques about this comic, so I'm in the middle about it. And so let me get to kind of my feelings about it. I'll tell you, I like the direction of the story concept. There was one major thing that kind of hit me in a negative way. It felt kind of out of character for Storm to steal the blade without asking that an emergency message be sent to King T'Challa. So this would have felt a bit more characterized, Stealing the blade, I get it. Totally fine. But stealing it without that first intuitive, just asking. All you had to do was ask to contact the king. I will say this. It feels like a lot of these mutants are acting very differently than they used to. And hey, look, I get my intuition is just living on the sentient mutant island of Krakoa is changing pretty much everyone, in my opinion. Like their whole personalities, except for Wolverine. So if you remember in the pages of Giant-Sized X-Men from 1975, Krakoa had trapped the X-Men on the island and was feeding off their powers, literally sapping abilities, but all the while killing them also. And Charles had to put a whole new team together to go rescue them, and they barely made it out alive. So this is my question. What if Wolverine isn't being affected? Because, he has a really fast regeneration. Just a thought. on how all of their personalities are changing and why that might be occurring. I could be wrong, of course. I sometimes am. Second thought about characterization. It has a little bit more to do with plot, but also characters. I'm looking right now at House and Power's hardcover, and there have been a lot of rejections for diplomacy all over the globe when it comes to Krakoa and accepting them as trading partners. And while, of course, Latveria rejected diplomacy with Krakoa because of political ideology, Wakanda rejected diplomacy because they believe this, and I quote, "They do not need mutant drugs." I will say this, that is the only one that is marked in red. Usually when something is marked in red out of an entire list, and this is a white page from that book, it usually means something important. So if Wakanda has diplomacy marked with some red mark, it means that this is something important. So look, it could be very well that I'm reading into this situation a bit more than most individuals, but more than 100 nations have accepted a trade deal with Krakoa, and it's a very small list of those who refuse diplomatic relations and trade. So the gift of flowers of Krakoa are absolutely the most powerful thing that the world has seen in pharmaceuticals. I mean, think about curing every disease of the mind, every antibiotic component ever needed, and, well, extending life for at least 5 more years. Like, while I understand, the technology of Wakanda is above the majority of nations on the planet, or maybe all of them, I would just simply say that, they don't need their product. The truth of the matter is that I feel like Wakanda and Krakoa haven't had the best relations through all the founding of this and the nation. I do see the tones of some discrepancies in the writings of all of these Dawn of X books, so it makes me think that sometimes maybe everyone is even operating in separate Moira timelines. I know that may be a little bit intense, but all of the discrepancies kind of make me feel that at times. I want to make it clear how much I do enjoy the direction of this story overall. I do find that pacing and dialogue is truly one of the most difficult things for writers, but specifically comic book writers, to nail in truth. I feel a lot of unnecessary dialogue. It stretches out the page count, and I feel like that may have been what happened here because Marvel said that that's what they wanted out of this book. I'll be honest, if we cut this down to half the pages, it really would have streamlined the story. It would have made it a lot easier to read. Again, I don't have much room to talk. Last editor I worked with told me the same thing about my own writing. Half my page count, delete repeated messages, get to the point faster, was her advice. So I'm taking it, and I understand I can be a bit wordy. I came from a theater and poetry background, and that's all I need to say. That's it. So, that being said, the pacing of the story would improve significantly in that case. One of my favorite things about this story was I just liked the fight scenes, This whole entire story was fun, and it had exciting moments, and it lended to a good push overall. I'm really committed to all of this, so, I'm showing some love toward this writing that isn't necessarily my favorite style. I do appreciate this storytelling. And, this series continues to move in the direction that's very enjoyable for me. Again, I'm just a dude with opinions. I'd really love what everyone else has to say. Tell me in the comments below. Let me know what you think. I've heard a big difference of opinions on this one, and I'm kind of in the middle, to be honest. Like I said above, we really have seen some very positive and some negative things about it. Let me know what you think. Tell me, am I spot on, or am I jerk, or am I pushover? As long as you drop a comment below, I'm grateful. I would love for you to subscribe, but above all, support your local comic shop, and you are the gateway into comics.